There is a massive development unfolding in the skies above us right now. And if you are living in the northeast or paying attention to the flight paths across our airspace, you might have noticed that things have changed. The United States Air Force, or rather their highly specialized contractors, are back in Nigerian airspace, and this time they mean business. We are talking about advanced surveillance flights that are reportedly paving the way for something much bigger in the fight against terrorism in the Sambisa Forest and beyond. The headline you saw is not just empty noise. It is backed by flight tracking data and high-level confirmations that suggest the United States is no longer just watching from the sidelines. After the heated threats from US President Donald Trump just last month regarding the safety of Christian communities in Nigeria, we are now seeing the physical manifestation of those words in the form of Gulfstream V jets circling our territory. We need to break down exactly what is happening because the details are quite chilling for the bad guys, but also raise a lot of questions for our sovereignty. Reports coming out this week confirm that the United States has been conducting intensive intelligence gathering flights over large parts of Nigeria since late November. This is not a one-off. We are seeing a pattern. These aircraft are taking off from our neighbor, Ghana, specifically from Accra, flying deep into Nigerian airspace, gathering data, and then returning to base. This operation signals a level of security cooperation between Abuja and Washington that we have not seen in years, and it comes right after President Trump made it clear that he would not tolerate the continuous violence against religious communities in Nigeria. The specific aircraft involved in these missions has been identified as a Gulfstream V. Now, when you hear Gulfstream, you might think of a luxury private jet used by billionaires and music stars. But make no mistake, this bird is not for popping champagne. It is a long-range business jet that has been heavily modified for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It is packed with sensors, cameras, and listening devices capable of picking up a pin drop in the Sambisa Forest. Flight tracking data for December shows this aircraft taking off from Accra, doing its walk over Nigeria, and heading back. The operator has been identified as Tenax Aerospace, a company based in Mississippi that is known for providing special mission aircraft and works very closely with the US military. This is the real deal. What makes this story even more intense is the context behind it. Remember back in November when President Trump issued that stern warning? He spoke about intervening militarily if the violence didn't stop. Many people thought it was just political bluster, but barely weeks later, we have American eyes in our sky. It is widely believed that these surveillance flights are the precursor, the homework, if you will, before any potential kinetic action or bombing of terrorist hideouts. You do not send a surveillance plane just to admire the view. You send it to mark targets. The intelligence gathered by these jets is likely being used to map out the exact locations of Boko Haram and ISWAP camps, their supply routes, and their hostage-holding cells. This brings us to a very critical point about why the US is suddenly so interested. It is not just about altruism. There is a specific trigger. Reports indicate that these operations are also focused on finding a US pilot who was working for a missionary agency and was kidnapped in Niger months ago. The Americans do not play with the lives of their citizens. When one of theirs is taken, they move heaven and earth, and in this case, they move air assets to find them. A former US official revealed that this aircraft was among several assets moved to Ghana by the Trump administration in November specifically to track this kidnapped pilot and gather intelligence on the militant groups operating in our borders. Before we dive deeper into the diplomatic meetings that authorize this and what the Nigerian government is saying, I want to take a quick moment to ask you to please smash that like button. If you are finding this update valuable and you want to stay ahead of the news that affects our national security, hitting like helps the video spread to more Nigerians who need to know what is happening. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell right now. We are tracking these flights daily and you don't want to be the last to know if the situation escalates to actual airstrikes. Now, let's look at the official side of things. This is not an invasion, it is a partnership, albeit a pressured one. Sources confirm that during a high-level meeting on November 20, Nigeria's National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, met with the U.S. Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. In that meeting, it was agreed that the U.S. would deploy air assets for intelligence gathering. This agreement effectively gave the green light for what we are seeing now. The Pentagon has released a statement saying they held productive meetings with Nigeria following Trump's message, although they, as expected, declined to comment on the specific intelligence activities. They call it diplomatic sensitivity, but we call it preparing for war against the terrorists. It is also important to understand the geopolitical shift happening here. Remember that recently, the US was kicked out of Niger. They lost their major desert air base there as Niger turned to Russia for security assistance. This left a massive blind spot for American intelligence in West Africa. Liam Carr, the Africa team lead at the Critical Threats Project, analyzed the flight data and pointed out that Washington is essentially rebuilding its intelligence capacity in the region, using Ghana as the new hub. Accra has become the launchpad and Nigeria is the theater of operation. This shift is significant because it places Nigeria right in the center of the US counter-terrorism strategy for 2025. The situation on the ground in Nigeria makes this intervention almost necessary. We know that President Bola Tinubu declared a security emergency last month. We have seen mass recruitment orders for the army and police following deadly attacks and the abduction of more than 300 school children in the northern states. The insecurity has been worsening, and it seems the Nigerian military needs this high-tech support to finally pin down these elusive terror groups. The eyes in the sky provided by Tenax Aerospace could be the game changer that helps our Air Force or perhaps US assets rain down fire on the terrorists who have been hiding in the deep forests for too long. But we must also ask the hard questions. Is this surveillance solely for our benefit, or is it primarily to protect American interests and citizens? While the Nigerian government argues that US claims of Christian persecution simplify a complex situation, insisting that armed groups target both Muslims and Christians, the reality is that Trump's threat was specific to religious violence. The fact that the planes arrived after that threat suggests that Washington is watching to see if the Nigerian government is actually protecting these vulnerable communities. It's a trust but verify situation. The Americans are watching every move, and these flights are the evidence. The aircraft itself, the Gulfstream V, was spotted at MacDill Air Force Base in Florida on November 7. MacDill is the headquarters of the U.S. Special Operations Command. That is no coincidence. From Florida, it flew to Ghana on November 24, just days after Ribadu met Hegseth, and has been flying over Nigeria almost daily since then. This timeline is tight, and it shows a rapid deployment of resources. It tells us that the Trump administration is not waiting around for bureaucracy. They identified the problem, they moved the assets, and now they are operational. So, what happens next? If the headline suggests bombing terrorists soon, it follows the logic of modern warfare. First comes the surveillance, then comes the analysis, and finally the strike. Whether the actual bombing will be done by Nigerian Super Tucanos using American intelligence or by American drones themselves remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the terrorists in Sambisa Forest can no longer hide under the cover of darkness. They are being watched by some of the most advanced technology on the planet. This development also puts pressure on the Nigerian military to perform. With the US providing real-time data on terrorist movements, there will be no excuses for missing the targets. The collaboration is tight, but the expectations are higher. We are watching a new phase of the war against terror in Nigeria, one that involves international players, high stakes, and the very real possibility of kinetic strikes in the near future.